Welcome back, everyone, to another episode 25 from this ongoing, growing podcast playlist on reigniting the fragments of the fourth way, where Peter Ingle and myself, Mihai Algiu, we are presenting some important, essential topics, aspects of higher knowledge that we have received from this fourth way tradition, and we present them having digested them and applied them. So it's not simply a theoretical lecture, and all of these are meant to be verified and applied in oneself for purposes of furthering conscious evolution. You'll see below the playlist for all the other previous episodes. This is a part 2 from something that we started last time. And if you're seeing this, I recommend you see previous episode 24, men as a lying animal. It's a quote from Gurdjieff. And the study of lying, in the fourth way, lying is one of the obstacles, and these obstacles are actually nothing else but manifestations of being unconscious, identified. And in the fourth way, we are encouraged to, after getting some grasp on the core method of self-observation, self-remembering, harnessing more attention, being more present, to then tackle these areas that keep us asleep. And lying is one of them, and there are multiple forms of lying. We talked last time primarily about something that Gurdjieff and Ouspensky didn't talk so much, although it's essential. This external lying, being out of integrity, being deceptive. We talked in depth about that. And the plan today is to continue with several subtopics connected to lying, which are a form of lying is this aspect of simply talking about things that we don't really know and we cannot know, but we talk as if we know, and we are experts and specialists, and thus we are tricking ourselves, tricking others, and there's a lot of side effects of this. Another aspect we are going to touch upon today is another form of lying, where we are exaggerating, adding superlatives, embroidering, making something more juicy, changing our actual experience or what happened or what we saw, again, for certain seeming subconscious payoffs, as well as there are costs about that. So all of these forms that we are going to touch today, we will keep the structure of presenting what's the actual manifestation. Then we'll explore what's the seeming utility or seeming advantage or payoff, why our false personality is doing that, as well as the cost and the disadvantage of doing that and how to work with it. Another form of lying we're going to touch about, or something related to lying, is this concept of buffers. It's unique from what I studied to the fourth way system. And another important thing is that there's this concept, a controversial concept or practice of intentional insincerity. Gurdjieff was saying that it is not being honest, saying everything to everyone all the time, that is actually ignorant, stupid, and dangerous. And part of the smart men, clever men, sly men in the fourth way, which is being in life in the midst of questionable organizations, governments, or rules and laws, it may be necessary or may imperative to, while keeping certain divine laws intact and following conscience, not to be formatory or rigid with this telling the truth at all costs all the time. So we're going to explore that. And the last subtopic we want to touch upon is this area of a very painful form of lying, which there is science even today that can lead to diseases, cancer, and all kind of problems, psychological, emotional, as well as physical problems. This difficulty of being authentic, being real, being in touch with the yeses and nos in ourselves and honoring them, or putting this in a fourth way terminology, just like a tiger or a giraffe or any other mammalian, they have within in their essence some sense of yes and no in a given moment, to do this, to not to do that, to engage with this being or not to engage. We have ourselves as well, this essence, yes and no. And due to various reasons we're going to explore later, but primarily to conditioning and childhood programming and other factors like that, we've been trained to override them, to ignore our own inner truth of the essence, to do things we don't want to do, to say yes when we have no, to engage in all kind of ways that we go against ourselves, compromise ourselves, and we pay for that with other side effects that will happen afterwards: resentment, holding back of ourselves, holding back of our emotional body, and ultimately the body gets sick, tired of us denying its truth, going against ourselves, then body at some point shuts down or develops cancer. And so we're going to touch on that, this aspect of false personality, of being a good boy, being a people pleaser, seeking approval, yes man, can't say no. That's the ambitious agenda we have for today. So I suggest we start with the first topic of this form of lying, of talking about things that we don't know, or we cannot know as if we know. I'll give it to you if you have something here.
I think, Mihai, something interesting about all these categories you've mentioned, and for us to keep in mind, is not only the forms they take. I'm just hearing that horn,
Yeah, there is
waiting
something
for
on
it
this
to
on the street.
the alarm.
Let
Yes.
we use in the fourth way work these alarms, although it's obnoxious, can be obnoxious and irritated. We have exercises to use them to remind us to be more aware.
That's something for us to keep in mind as we're talking about all of these different forms of lying, is why we lie. Well, it's a fundamental question. Why do human beings lie to each other and to themselves? And I say that because when we look at this, and we can start with your first category, but when we look at this, at least what I have found when I look underneath it is the realization that we are afraid of the truth. Isn't that curious? We are afraid of the truth. We are more comfortable, at least initially, with a lie than we are with the truth. And the little thing about lying, exaggerating, talking about things we don't know, I believe that was the first topic you wanted to cover. We are afraid of being small, of being no one, of not knowing, of being here on earth in human form, in the midst of this mystery of creation, and understanding really very little about how all this came to be, what it's about. And we don't want to face this, what is actually a beautiful truth. And it's not necessarily uncomfortable. It's profound and it can be sobering. It can be sobering is a good word, but we don't want that. We're afraid of that. And it's amazing what we do to avoid realizing our simple existence of not knowing,
Hmm.
of being, but not knowing.
Hmm.
And I mean, you can help me here too, giving examples maybe. And when we talk about things we don't know, let's put aside for the moment things outside of humanity, but just in life, opinions, opinions that we develop and attitudes we develop about things ranging from politics to health,
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
finances, to relationships, to family, how to raise children, how a city should be run and managed, how companies ought to operate from our point of view. The list goes on and on. And we it's a psychological comfort to the ego to act as though, but first we lie to ourselves. And I think we mentioned this in our previous video. First we lie to ourselves, then we can successfully lie to other people. So we lie to ourselves that we should know, we do know, we ought to know, we ought to have an opinion, we ought to. And when we
Hmm.
tell a story about ourselves, it ought to be interesting, should be interesting. So maybe a little exaggeration is in order.
Hmm. Hmm.
And also, we want our life to be more. For example, when we tell a story about ourselves from the past, as you mentioned earlier in the intro, we can tend to add a lot of color
Hmm.
and some distortion and and if you look carefully, you know when you're doing that. If you're honest with yourself, you know. It didn't
Hmm.
really go quite that way, but you
Hmm.
said it. Because it's something, this impulse comes, this urge to
Yeah.
exaggerate, to embellish, to look better, it's almost as though we're an animal raising our skin. We're making ourselves out to be bigger and better, more beautiful, more wonderful, more extraordinary than we are. And in truth, we're very simple. We're just these little human beings
Hmm.
on one planet in one solar system, all of which we know little about.
Hmm.
But it's not easy to be at a dinner table with a group of people who are having a heated discussion about something, some topic of the day, and they turn to you and ask you, or look at you, assuming you're going to and you say, I don't know. It's not very
Hmm.
interesting to
Yeah.
other people's egos and to their personalities. And yet that could become an incredible topic for discussion.
Hmm.
But that's not what we do. We are uncomfortable. We're afraid of the truth.
Yeah. I guess to give more example, different levels, different scales. For instance, a lot of this conflict, political conflict, military conflict with Israel and Palestine, and there's people heated up and talking and very sure of what it is and who's to blame and taking positionality and being outraged. But very few people know the whole extent of the chronology and the depths and the origin of this conflict and all the factors. And usually we jump on one side with a strong positionality to be right, or just getting inflamed with some trigger that we have that resonates with one side or the other side. So talking about things like that. Other example would be whatever people, even this in the Don Miguel Ruiz teaching, the Four Agreements, is making assumptions. Usually somebody says something and then we are triggered because subconsciously or fairly quickly we assume what they mean or assume what they have in mind. So that is a suffering creating device, making assumptions rather than asking, keeping it simple. Things like what happens when we die, what happens when the body dies, what happens after we die, what happens with the soul, what is the soul, past life, lifetimes. And I understand some people can have some inner revelation, or at least I did some kind of processing in the past of past life regression, and I experienced certain things, very, very visceral and powerful and emotional, and images and visuals, as well as insights that made a lot of sense. Yet I chose ultimately to be like, this could very well be very true, could be totally true. And it could be it's a product of my subconscious now, and it's still useful. Even if it's not a past life, it's still useful, plays out certain things. But talking with conviction and certainty about these things, and making conclusions or making choices based on just wiseacring, imagination. This is imagination, we don't know. Other planets, the Egyptians, the first civilization, the cavemen, the tribal. I myself catch myself often using this, in the tribal culture, they used to do this or that, but I don't know. I have seen a bunch of movies, I read a few books. I don't know. So you see, it's very, we're so raised in culture where we get a lot of kudos for knowing data, knowing about stuff, things, even if those things are false. So we are praised for being intelligent. He's so intelligent. Look at him, such as a smart boy. There was this false personality likes to be interesting. The payoffs here, yeah, to be interesting, to be liked, to be appreciated, to be considered superior, to be considered knowledgeable, to have a status. All of this upholding this pillar of me, which as we go deeper in this work or in the non-dual work, we realize this pillar of me is a construct, is shifting with a bunch of lies, memories, sensation that is not the me. The me is not the me. It's a movie. It's a production.
And you mentioned early on about payoff, because there's a kind of gratification when we lie. And what's strange about it is we may not necessarily in the moment feel that we are lying. We feel that we have a strong opinion. We ought to know, we should know, after reading 3 newspaper articles, that we understand all the things happening behind the world events, which is ludicrous when you think about it. And yet, there's a gratification, and it happens first inside. And this taste of this imaginary I, what some traditions call the ego, this imaginary self, this feeling of me gets gratified by being the one who knows. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're doing it in company and you're the one who knows. You can be sitting in your living room reading and forming opinions and concluding and issuing blame and delegating causes and feeling that you know and feeling quite good. I know I have conquered this topic. And that's self-gratifying for the ego. It's very peculiar when you look at it as for what it truly is. It's very peculiar that human beings do this with their psyche. As opposed to, and when we do this, when we conclude about something, usually it's almost as though the entire universe collapses down to a little dot to my conclusion about this topic. As opposed to when we recognize we don't know, suddenly there's an opening, and when we're open to not knowing, we suddenly open ourselves to much more.
Yeah.
And again, it's strange that we are afraid of this. Something in us, is more accurate to say, something in us is afraid to be open this way. But strange, you can't really know until you first don't know.
Yeah.
There has to be a place to put the knowing. I'm getting
It's
off topic a little though. It's again because I'm interested in what is behind this lying. Why do in a way, it's not important the form it takes. In the
mhm.
end, if we know what's operating behind the scenes here, psychologically with lying as a human being, we'll start to see all these forms of lying in a clearer light.
Another payoff I see is that the imaginary eye, as I like how you put it, the imaginary eye is a highly unstable. Actually, it's a mist, um, and it's uncomfortable with this status quo. So it wants to have certainty, it wants to know, so to have some sense of stability, a sense of safety through these lies. And as we said, we don't usually. I'm not knowingly. I am regurgitating the same lies and standard bricks of knowledge, which are not for sure that I'm bringing it up. It's a habit um, of having certainty. And remember, I'm reading again or going through the Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Suzuki Roshi, and he was saying that that's important in also in relation to our practice of our knowledge that we apply, spiritual knowledge. He said the he said that Zen or the practice is not that it is hard, but it is simple. It is hard actually to keep it fresh and to not get locked into a sense of I'm an expert and I know. Said the Zen, the beginner's mind, Zen mind, beginner's mind. The beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert mind, there are very few. So I can see this even applying it to we've been practicing something for a long time, practicing meditation, and it becomes can be mechanical. I'm doing this because of this and that, and it's a recipe rather than having the practice fresh, be surprised, and each time maybe have a different intention or decide, hey, I'm sitting now 30 minutes in order to see what is here that is aware of these things, or i'm I'm sitting here in order to I sense something in my rumbling in my basement and I like to not to face it, or to have some fresh new approach, even if we've been practicing for decades. It's pretty challenging. But moving to this exaggeration, yeah, exaggeration, using superlatives. Yeah, this seems the utility, subconscious utility or payoff is to be liked, to be considered special, knowledgeable, to be more, to be more. Because the imaginary I is empty, we want to solidify, to get the okayness from other imaginary eyes.
And
That
sometimes we can do that by imposing our lie onto someone else, is one way to look at it. And another way is where we resist. Some people just resist, and their lie is holding the opposite position.
mm,
It's always to come up with a rebuttal,
mhm,
as though I know that's not true.
mm,
I know what you just said with all your conviction and all your hyperbole. I know that's not true. And now I'm lying from the
yeah,
position of resistance as opposed to the position of power. Because lying can be both power, it can take the form of both kind of power, kind of overbearingness, as well as a form of resistance. And we're afraid. Again, underneath this, there's a fear.
yeah.
This is for each person to look at in themselves. This is wordless, to start to peel away these layers of this onion of lying.
There's this dramatization in the superlative aspect of lying or exaggerating. There's the imaginary I, false personality, wants to be dramatic, to be convincing, to have more juice And I remember that I was reading the workbooks that was Pensky, and he was saying that as we become more conscious and truly remember ourselves more and false personality diminishing, other people are not necessarily going to find us, oh wow, he's so deep, he's so mystical. No, usually one will be perceived as more boring, more flat. One is not going to be so witty and so smart and always having the right answer. One will be more silent. One will have nothing to say. Uh, and that requires quite spiritual maturity to be okay with this bland, non-embroidery. Another powerful and useful idea that Gurdjieff was talking about is that actually man in a state of identity as the imaginary I and self-forgetfulness, he cannot tell the truth because he cannot know the truth. So it's unknowingly lying. And he was talking about the fact that even this imaginary I, this our false personality, actually is comprised of various sub-personalities, different aspects of myself, different identities that show up in triggered by circumstances, and different very parts of ourselves that are very opposed to each other, and they believe different things, or they believe opposed things about the same thing. So it's hard to be honest, because in the usual sleep state, this we don't know all of these parts, and each one of them becomes a king for a moment. So in order to really be honest, truly honest, we need to be able to see them all, to see the whole of my false imaginary I. And this is one big part of awakening. Before we can, while we are awakening to that which is real, is being, is hearing right now, we become awake to that which is false and all the lies. And in the system, there's this idea that in sleep, the system, the machine protects itself. There are buffers akin to those pieces of metal or devices between carriages in a train, that they diminish shocks. So the idea was that we have certain walls between the different parts. One part that is priding in being honest and integrity and accountability, and then another part right here that is very comfortable and is engaging in lying and manipulating for personal benefit, and another part here that is lying in order to avoid conflict or to avoid somebody being upset with us. So we are conveniently identifying with the one that I'm an honest person, and we don't see when the other compartment comes up, and there are these buffers. And Gurdjieff was saying that those are necessary as we are unconscious, because if we were to see all of our sub-identities, which by the way is not that this is multiple personality disorder or one is psychotic, and when Jesus says the man is legion, it's not as a clinical case, although in some people this becomes so deep that it becomes a clinical case. But everybody has sub-personalities and multiple personalities. And if we were to be aware of all of them, it will be so unpleasant, so unbearable, so painful to be confronted with our false imaginary I. And therefore the system protects itself. But as we become more conscious and we have the courage to face these things, then we need to remove the layers and to be courageous and face all these different protagonists within ourselves. And then we can truly be honest. And I know you probably have something on this idea of buffers. how to make this practical, or how to observe them in oneself, or how to work with them. Any tips on this?
One of the ideas behind buffers, this word buffers in the fourth way, is that they diminish the impact of contradictions within us. So we don't feel the contradiction. This is the idea. And a buffer is not necessarily an attitude or a point of view or something. It's deeper than that. It's entrenched in more than one center in us. And so, for example, there are eyes in us that want to eat healthy. And they make a decision. The decision is made. It feels like I am deciding now I'm going to eat healthy. And then there's another group of eyes that do not care about that. They're not interested in that. They're not opposed to the eyes that want to eat healthy. They just are very different. They're different eyes. They're in a different compartment. And this can be partly explained in the fourth way by the different parts of the centers and the different centers themselves. But what happens is the eyes that want to eat healthy then sort of fade into the woodwork. And out of the woodwork appear the eyes that don't care about that. They don't even know, but they're not interested in that. It's not a factor in their life. And then, so we do not see that these different parts of ourselves are in contradiction. They do not contradict one another necessarily, but they are in contradiction to each other relative to us being aware of them, because we fall asleep in each group as they appear. The same thing if we say want to save money, and then we find ourselves out shopping and buying something we don't need. It's just a completely different group of eyes. But instead of seeing that, there's kind of a, it's almost a magic show,
Squirming.
a squirming, and there's a little quick little thing that happens, but it's hard to perceive in ourselves when these buffers, it's a sort of a revolving door. You go from one, and then for a moment, you're in the revolving door psychologically. And then suddenly you're in the next compartment, you're in the next group of eyes. And you don't realize what's happening. And part of this work is not necessarily to get rid of these buffers, because you can't actually get rid of them. They diminish of their own accord by virtue of seeing what we're talking about. And what happens is there can be moments, if you watch carefully, where you can be aware of yourself in the revolving door. But this requires being present, a more present. Another way to say it is you have to get above the maze to look down and see all of the pathways that lead and where all these little revolving doors are. You can't see them from down in the mouse box, in the mousetrap.
Yeah.
There are other examples. I've mentioned food, health, money. I'm going to stop drinking so much. I'm going to stop having 3 glasses of wine. I'm just going to have one now every night, or one every 2 days, or I'm going to stop smoking, or I'm going to have only 3 cigarettes a day, or I'm not going to eat this certain type of food. It can also be behavior. I'm not going to interrupt so much. I notice I interrupt other people when they're talking. I'm going to have this aim not to interrupt. And then what happens? We go through that revolving door, and now we are doing all those things contrary, in contradiction to the other group of eyes. And what the buffers do is create the illusion of unity. Because it doesn't matter which group of eyes we're in, which compartment we're in, we think it's it's me in that moment. And we don't see the contradiction. We don't see the separation, the compartmentalization in our psyche, in our behavior, in our choices, in our decisions. And something else Gurdjieff said is these buffers, always allow you to feel as though you're in the right.
Huh.
So the eyes that feel, I'm going to now eat healthy, they feel as though they're in the right. And they are. And the eyes that then go against that feel that they are right. And they are. They are right for themselves.
Yeah. So to see all of this is painful, but in the system, and basically the buffers prevent us from being painful, prevent us to see this and be painful or see our contradiction. But as we do this work, now we are going to peer through the other compartment, and then there are different stages of going through this, because they are okay. They are. I give an example, also practical example. People I work with or people that are part of our groups. Let's say, yeah, somebody decides I'm not going to have wine anymore. I'm having wine. I'm not going to have wine, or I am going to investigate. I'm going to investigate what's happening with the urge. I want to observe the urge of wanting to have wine. I'm going to delay myself, which is a good exercise to delay gratification, to observe the underlying energy or uncomfortable or energy or feeling that wants to have wine. So I put an exercise to myself. Okay, it's fine to have wine, but I'm going to wait for 10 minutes or a cigarette or a cookie to observe this sense of lack or this sense of something is missing or this sense of unease. And that's my aim. And then people report that that's forgotten completely. Or they are already having the wine. The wine is the hand poured the bottle, the hand poured the wine in the glass, and then as they are drinking, they realize, whoa, what happened? As if somebody took over. You see? So this is one stage. Another stage is one can say, well, I changed my mind. It was a hard day. I really need this. So
Which is a good
somehow
example of a buffer.
right.
And it's not verbalized, but there's that feeling. It's been a hard day. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I deserve it. This is
Yeah.
necessary now.
Yeah.
These come as sensations and feelings that gloss over our awareness for a moment. And this is us going through the revolving door.
Yeah. This is very often people come and work with me and they are telling me, yeah, man, it's so useful to have 15 minutes to just be and be present, observe. I'm going to do this. And then they come after a week and I say, how's it going? So I haven't done it at all. And I'm asking them, hey, I'm curious about something. Did you forget completely? It didn't cross your mind, or did it sometimes cross your mind that there was something else there? So I'm trying to hone them into that. And it's interesting, whatever they report, there are different stages. So this is kind of lying to oneself.
Yes. And it seems innocuous, and from the point of view of ordinary, so what? It's okay. You're lying to yourself. What's the harm? But we're talking about it and examining it from the point of view of consciousness, from conscious awareness. What happens to our awareness in these moments? This is what we are focused on. And then these practices, these exercises take on a different meaning, a different dimension. Now we're doing this. We're trying to look at the contradictions, not as bad things, but in terms of what happens to our awareness when we pass from one group of eyes to another group of eyes, from one compartment to another group of compartment. Why don't we remember that? Why don't we realize that? Why don't these eyes ever get together and talk to each other? What's going on with awareness, with consciousness? And this is the fruitful part of it. There are many people who struggled with many things using many techniques. And they're valid psychological techniques, but they don't address the consciousness aspect, the awareness aspect, and what this has to do with all the rest. It's the backdrop of this unconscious awareness that causes these reflexes called buffers to happen in us.
Yeah.
And then we torture ourselves. We live in turmoil, psychological turmoil, because we are contradictory and we can't resolve that. And we feel good and then we feel bad. Then we feel good again and then we feel bad about it. We did it again and then we feel bad about it. And then we're feeling
Yeah,
guilty, or we're punishing ourselves,
yeah,
or we're pretending it didn't happen.
yeah.
All of these things are now going on, and this is all psychological turmoil. This is human suffering of a sort that is self-imposed because our consciousness is asleep.
In this area of addiction, compulsions, which are a rich area, I'm not talking about, hey man, you just get strong, be strong, and don't do that because it's not good for you. That doesn't work like that. Um, but I often see this approach, even people who are in the work, they, yeah, basically they identify with each sub part. And there's this part saying, man, I'm not going to go to have this bad toxic food, and I'm going to just cook well for myself, or I'm not going to smoke. And then the other part that is suffering, that wants to soothe, this just comes right away, and there is no discussion. There's no discussion, and then the other part comes and is upset, like, God damn it, why do you do this? And so there's inner battle. There's two forces fighting, that basically fighting myself at the same level. So no one will win. There will be a constant. Actually, it's a discovery in the addiction world that this the first layer of investigating addiction or compulsion is to open this file and to see two opposing forces. There is this, I want it, I want it, I want it now, I want to have it now, the so-called craving. And on the other side, there is aversion, which is, I shouldn't have it, it's not good for me, don't do it, I shouldn't have it. So it's important to, in the work I do sometimes with addiction, is to make conscious each one of them and let it be as it is. Let it see what it says. No, I want it now, leave me alone. I just have it, I must have it. Be honest about that. Bring
Mm-hmm.
awareness to it. And then there are some ways to trigger the other one, that will see that at the same time I have this now, I shouldn't have it, man. This is no good for you. You are weak, and
Mm.
all kind of stuff like that. And if we stay at this level, they perpetuate themselves, and they proliferate also more self-deprecation, self-blame. Because this is happening. I'm weak, and look at you. I don't deserve anything. Of course, yeah.
And
So
this is all going on in the name of I,
yeah,
which is so interesting. It's going on in the name of I. I am fighting with myself. I want this. I don't want this. This is not consciousness itself. This is not the awareness itself, which is
yeah.
there, right there, watching all this, but doesn't know that it's there, doesn't realize itself there watching. That's when we start to change dimension, when
Yeah.
this starts to come into focus.
And that is, even there's discovered somehow, some psychologists or people with addiction, they stumbled upon it, this principle. And Einstein, I remember, he said that you cannot solve a problem at the same level with the problem. You have to go to a dimension higher. So practically speaking, a very nice way that I recommend to people, and I sometimes use it myself, with something that I have this split, this yes and no, wanting, not wanting it, is this exercise. For instance, with smoking tobacco, to to observe the actual craving, not even call it craving. Before you go for the cigarette, to observe that, or the wanting to get fast food, to observe that and not fight it. Just even for a week, yeah? Just not fight it. But really, my task is to really observe that as a scientist that's going to pay lots of bucks to make a detailed report. So observe the craving. Then I can't stop it. There's not enough will. Then eating it or smoking the thing. So now, okay, go for it. Have the donut, have the cigarette, but can you be very aware? can you be very, very aware of when you are smoking it or eating the donut? Be aware of it, and actually every puff or every bite, because it's interesting. I observe this when I'm able to be so finely aware. The first puff, there is a yeah, and then the second puff, it's a little different.
Mhm.
The second puff, it's like a little something doesn't like it. And then the third puff, that is more pronounced. The fourth puff is, man, why am I doing this? I don't like this. So to observe and not get involved in each sub nuance of this. Actually, there was a very famous book, some guy who quit smoking, but he was saying before you decide to quit smoking, don't quit. Put a date sometime in the future, at the end of the year, and your task is to be very aware when you are smoking and see if you really like it. And when it changes from, oh yeah, to disgust. And then, so observing all of this, then the burger has been eaten, or the cookie or the cigarette, then to remain and observe this not feeling good. Observe that too. So you see, now we bring this other dimension and all of these different parts. The I must have it, I'm bad for having it. I can't help, I have to get it, although I don't want to. And then I'm actually enjoying it. Now I'm not enjoying it. Now I feel bad. So to not fight at least. So this will strengthen this other dimension, because if there is any change needs to happen, any change that may happen, there needs to be this more like a ruling faculty that has accumulated all of this information. And it's Marcus Aurelius will call it. So there must be, or we can grow this ruling faculty, which is of another dimension. It cannot be the same level of these fighting eyes.
And it's interesting, the sequence you described, in the sense that often in some of the areas we've mentioned, food, help, certain addictions, money, there's usually an urge. And I know that in your work, Mihai, you study how that can come from a feeling of lack. And that this urge springs from that. But nevertheless, wherever it comes from, there is the urge to indulge in this, whatever it is. And then there's permission granted to indulge. This is the subtle part. This is part of the revolving door.
Mm.
And often the urge is in our instinctive center, what the fourth way describes as the instinctive center. Even if it was prompted by something in our emotional center as a feeling of lack or dissatisfaction or discomfort emotionally, it arises as an urge in the instinctive center. Then permission is granted by the emotional center. And these centers are both very fast in their operation, much faster than thought. So they don't think. It isn't, I want that. Okay, you can have that. Go ahead. There's not a conversation. These are impulses operating at fast speed. This revolving door happens. Do you know how you can, with video, you can have what's called a transition, where there's a fading in or fading out of the window. The screen appears to open and you go into another screen. These are like these revolving doors, but they're super fast. So there's the urge, then there's permission, then there's the indulgence, as you were describing. On the other side of permission, the urge and the indulgence is often a very different experience, as you were saying. That first puff. I remember I used to smoke as a younger person. That pleasure of taking out the cigarettes, getting it ready, maybe tapping it to get supposedly getting the tobacco down in it, just the act of doing that, and then putting it in the mouth, maybe pausing for a moment, and then lighting, going through the ritual now of indulgence, once permission was granted. But then after that first inhale, no, it wasn't that enjoyable. In my case, it wasn't that enjoyable after the first puff, like as you were describing. And so just to see this, but to understand there are different parts in us, these different centers. Urge, permission, indulgence can come from different centers. And this is something unique the fourth way offers in this regard. How do we break down where these eyes are coming from and where this sense of me is coming from and where these feelings, urges, permissions, indulgences are all coming from? How do they operate together? And they do it seamlessly in the feeling of I. Isn't it strange that how can we want something that's not good for us, then grant ourselves to have it, then enjoy it for a moment, then not like it, and then begrudge ourselves for having done it? All me,
Yeah,
myself. This is a peculiar. Animals don't do this. This is a
yeah,
human phenomenon. All that we're talking about, we've sort of wandered away from lying, but all of this is what makes up some of the ingredients that allow us to lie and are they're part of the, you could say, the psychological architecture of lying, because we do lie to ourselves in this regard. We don't want to do it, but we do it anyway. We lie to ourselves to do it.
yeah. And the example you shared, it's this classic verification, very simple, non-philosophical of this core tenets of the fourth way, that there is no unity at the level of the imaginary I. There's no unity, there's multiplicity, and there is no will. There's no one will. Each part has its own will. And it's important to start verifying this. Uh,
And this will
this
does not come from those eyes. The I that says, I want to eat healthy, it's not a matter of that particular I developing will, control, more steadfastness. This is how it's often approached. But that is not will in the sense of conscious will. Conscious will is that which is this other dimension we were referring to. This is where the will develops. It's an aspect of consciousness, of awareness, of not falling prey to becoming the feeling of I.
Yeah,
And it can even begin in the form of just seeing all that we just described.
yeah,
And it's okay. It's okay for all that to happen, because now at least it's starting to happen under the light of consciousness, under the light of awareness. That's the beginning of serious change. The stronger that light becomes, the harder it will be for this operation to happen in the dark
yes.
with the buffers.
Yes, that's what I was working with someone that is struggling with such type of strong eyes that want things, and I could see that because of the charge of these different aspects around food or substances, he will forget or she will forget about the consciousness aspect, and that was involved in warfare and trying to do something at the level of the mouse in the maze. And at some point I realized, I was like, listen, take yourself 1 week, man. Don't fight it. Don't fight it at all, because you've been trying to fight it all the time, and it's just try to observe this aspect before, observe during, observe the thoughts, observe the feeling, observe afterwards, observe how you feel bad. Just observe, and this is your task. Yeah. And then that, and what you said before, sometimes this will, I mean, sometimes the will doesn't grow for having like 3 days sobriety or 5 days sobriety, but the will, conscious will, grows in a mysterious way by not okaying myself to be lost in daydreaming all day, every day. And unrelated to my compulsion, I I I remind myself to come out of this daydreaming and come out of identification. And each time this it grows some kind of muscle, the muscle of our being, to not be so weak to lose itself into things like that.
Because when we do these indulgences, and I realize now we're talking almost more in the area of compulsion and the compulsiveness and things. But what happens is awareness gets identified. It literally gets pulled into the whirlpool of this activity, whatever it is. And that's the damage, so to say. It's not the thing itself. It's not the whirlpool itself. It's the fact that it sucks awareness into it, our conscious awareness. And will means conscious awareness withholding itself and not allowing itself to be vacuumed into whatever the thing is, whatever form it takes. And something else too is that, and again, this is part of the beauty of the fourth way, delineation of the centers and the different eyes and the different parts of us. Our instinctive center will sometimes lie. Other times it's our emotional center that's lying. The instinctive center will often lie in order to avoid being seen, caught, exposed. Our emotional center will lie so as not to be wrong. Doesn't want to be wrong. It's a different flavor, and this is interesting to observe in ourselves. What's the flavor of the lying? Is it something more instinctive in me? Because the instinctive center doesn't want to be exposed as being a selfish, manipulative, cunning, stealthy, which it is. It's all those things. But it doesn't want to be exposed as being all those things. And this is how we lie to ourselves. We don't want to see that we have this instinctive center, that this is how it operates. This is its natural form of operation. And similarly with the emotional center wants to be liked and it wants to be right. And it wants to be right for itself. And it's uncomfortable when it's wrong, and it's uncomfortable when it's wrong with others, which means it's being misunderstood by them. At least that's how the emotional center interprets it. So we lie from the emotional point of view in ourselves to avoid all this discomfort. And other times, what the fourth way calls our essence will lie. A little child, their essence will lie to cover up its tracks, to not be, Johnny, did you eat Mary's ice cream? No, no, the dog ate it. Or there's some little, it's a little simple lie, but there's an avoidance there, which is what lies are. They're an avoidance. And other times it's our personality that's lying. It has a different flavor. When personality lies, it's more harsh, it's more severe, it's more self-defensive, it's more guarded, it's more protective. And we can learn to distinguish these flavors. And it's not as though these are concrete things in us. They have different flavors, different hues that flow through us and influence our feeling of I in different moments. So this is another area to observe. Where's this line coming from in me? And in the fourth way, when you're more familiar with these different parts, it becomes possible. Now you start to see the full rainbow of colors of lying. Is it black? Is it red? Is it purple? Is it what color, flavor, hue is the lying? This becomes a complete study all in itself.
And here it's really, especially as we start to bring awareness to these not so noble parts of ourself, that is really as important to have this work principle of observing all this as a curious, interesting stranger, because we can easily observe something and then judge ourselves for it, blame ourselves, and beat ourselves up, and then the work stops, and then we are enmeshed in stuff. So to observe dispassionately, ruthlessly, to be honest, yeah, I have this part of me lied to her in the face to cover about this for fear of conflict. Yeah. And yes, there's sadness, there's shame, there's guilt. Allow that, observe that, but not go into judging that. Or if judgments come, to really not land on them, to keep staying as this scientifical, all welcoming of the observing faculty.
And another interesting buffer, you could call it a buffer. something about, let's say, the instinctive center will become evident in us, where we lied or covered our tracks or tried to hide or something. And then the emotional center will feel guilty about that. Because the instinctive center doesn't feel guilty. This comes from the emotional center. So now you have one center did one thing, another center is responding and taking responsibility. And then the emotional center in us is the part that says, well, you know what? I'm going to love myself anyway. I'm
Huh.
going to forgive myself and I'm going to now love myself. Let's see, what can I do to love myself more, better? And this is all, again, we're still down in the mousetrap. This is
Mhm.
just another part in us trying to make up for, compensate for, apologize for, admit guilt on behalf of this other part. And so that other part goes unseen. And this is often the case in us. The emotional center will sort of try to assume the responsibility for things that our instinctive center did. Instead of the instinctive center in us, I was going to say take responsibility for itself, but that isn't quite true. What we want to take responsibility in us is this conscience, what the fourth way calls conscience. And it's conscience is the absence of buffers. Or I should say consciousness, conscience is the thing that happens in the absence of buffers. When we see the truth about what we're doing, we see the truth of how these different parts of us are operating in contradiction to one another and how uncomfortable that is. When we see the truth, it's as though when we lie and these buffers are in place, the energy is locked into these different parts of us. And when the revolving door dissolves, when the buffer disappears, now there's a release.
Mhm.
It reminds me too that this is also interesting. When we lie, there's a saying, sometimes you have to lie to cover up a lie, and then
Mhm.
you have to lie to cover up the cover up. When we lie in these different ways to ourselves, something accumulates. It gets harder, heavier, denser, more difficult to break free from, becomes more of a psychological burden, causes more guilt, on and on and on. It's a condensation, a contraction, harder, deeper, firmer in us. And it's odd that we are afraid, because we're afraid we allow this to happen. But the opposite is true when we tell the truth, when we're authentic. You mentioned that at the beginning of our
Mhm.
talk tonight.
Mhm.
When we're authentic and we're honest, doesn't mean we have to reveal all of our issues to people. It means we're honest with ourselves, we're honest with how we relate to other people. And when we do, even though we sometimes suffer a little discomfort in that process, it's hard to tell the truth. It's hard to be authentic and honest because people aren't accustomed to that. And so when we do it, there can be a momentary discomfort, but once we've done it, and everyone has had this experience, once they tell the truth,
Hmm.
ooh, there's a relief.
Yeah.
That thing that was all crustated in us and hardened and blocked, it releases.
Hmm.
And this is what happens without conscience. But in the beginning, when conscience begins to come into play, it's all this debris in us is being revealed. It's coming up, and it's quite unpleasant to see the truth
Hmm.
about ourselves. Consciousness sees the truth. These different eyes don't see the truth about themselves. Consciousness, awareness in us sees the truth of how we really are. And as it does, you could almost say the light of this truth reflects in our emotional center as
Mhm.
understanding of
Hmm.
truth. And then this feeling of conscience happens in our emotional center. It's the result of being more conscious, of seeing more consciously the truth.
Yeah.
So it's not that we need to tell the truth all the time. We need to see the truth, know the
Hmm.
truth.
Mhm. Yeah, something that you said a few minutes ago uh, with this, oh, I just want to be loving towards myself now and then lie to myself. And I realized that it's one of the most loving thing towards oneself is to be honest with oneself. Uh, because then if I see this and I'm aware, And also they say conscience. So conscience is somehow not just knowing the truth about oneself, but about a particular situation. But there's an inbuilt, especially one has rescued conscience. If conscience has been resuscitated and is more like operating, then the conscience has a innate circumstantial sense of right or wrong in this situation, free from morality, free from commandments. There's a they didn't feel good how I talked to her. Not because I want to be nice, but I can see how I reacted, and it was she did nothing. And it was hurtful. But so keep it there. So I'm aware, and I feel that that was not aligned with the deeper with my values, or is not aligned with the reality, the understanding that she is myself and everybody is myself, and it's not aligned with the treat others as I want to be treated. But so having this conscience is a luxury. It's a more advanced step because it will haunt us when we go when we go off-roading. It will pain us. So we need to be willing
Mm-hmm.
to face this pain. But then it is like it's a compass. So
Mm-hmm.
it can help us to really navigate the relational waves and choices and remain. One of my teachers, Francis, will say that, okay, realize awareness, realize that what you are is this consciousness, but then you need to embody this, meaning to align. Oh, realize that I am this awareness, and this awareness may not be limited and personal, it's universal. And then align how I interact with others, how I do business, how I treat people around money, with this understanding that they are also consciousness and we are this consciousness. So from there is this what feels right to honor this principle, and the golden rule is a way that, I mean, it's a cheat sheet towards conscience, so to say. Peter, we I realized that we was a very ambitious what we had on our agenda to touch on all of these things, and unplanned, we realized we went deeper than we were planning to, but we are very happy about that, and to realize the actually the connection between self-forgetfulness, between lying as connected to buffers, and not seeing all parts of ourselves, and how conscience plays in that. And yeah, I suggest we pause it here, and we will continue with the last two aspects, which are also very essential, especially for me from the point of view of clinical work, psychosomatic work, trauma work, healing, this element of being authentic. Also in New Age now, New Age terminology, being authentic, be yourself, just be yourself, be authentic. Uh, that is praised. There are workshops, there are people go and dance and laugh, and there are all of this playful stuff, which is helpful. But actually being authentic is a very hard because we have been conditioned early on, and there's trauma underneath all of that, and shock, and our parents trauma and their own conditioning, that we learn early on to have this groove of not feeling safe to be myself, which starts at the level of a basic emotion. It's not safe, although the child doesn't have these thoughts, but it's just, I'm afraid to show this emotion. I'm afraid to say this. I'm afraid. So this inauthenticity, when we call it inauthentic, it sounds like judgmental and a bad rap, and it's ego. But underneath this inauthenticity, it's a very sweet innocence of our essence that that was shocked and hurt and decided to protect itself, even with this lying, to protect itself and to hide and to be different. And these grooves were formed at a time when we didn't have the frontal cortex until about 20 years old, or we are the brain, the centers, they are more in the limbic brain, reptilian brain and limbic brain. So we don't have the cognitive, the intellectual center developed. We don't have it. So these grooves of inauthenticity or not to be real that plays out in many ways, especially relationally, in how we show up with people, and creates so much suffering. They've been developed by a 5-year-old undeveloped brain that has been lodged in our essence. And from that, it grew all these strategic ways to be false in order to get approval, be safe, get love. This is a big topic. I already got into it. So I suggest we save this topic of and looking at this being real. What does it mean to be real? What does it mean to be authentic? It's much more difficult than we think. How to do that requires
Mhm.
also subconscious work and processing, and
I just would
how to
say,
go about it.
I would just say quickly too, in response to that, Mihai, that yes, you think I'm not authentic and I now want to be authentic. And you try these techniques and so on. And this doesn't work because we are inauthentic because of something else.
Mm,
And one way to say what that is, we
mhm,
are inauthentic because we didn't know how to manage the truth of a
mhm,
situation, even if it was painful. We didn't
mhm,
know how to manage that. And so all these other things happen, and then we are inauthentic as a result. And we only can become more authentic by learning how to manage the truth, is how I
mhm,
see it. And it's
mhm,
from that that authenticity comes. Authenticity and inauthenticity are results of something else in our
mhm,
being. And it's by addressing that and understanding that. It's not by trying to cease being
mhm,
inauthentic and trying to be more authentic. That is
mhm.
fruitless endeavor that will
Yeah,
keep us going in a spin, in a circle of, and it will cause turmoil for us because it won't work.
yeah,
But and it goes back to what I was saying in the beginning, we're afraid of the truth. And we lie because we're afraid of the truth and the consequences of the truth. And it's by trusting the truth in ourselves first and in our being that these other things begin to naturally realign themselves. Yes, it is once again,
yeah,
you're right. We've excavated a lot of material here.
yeah.
I'm surprised, in fact, and pleased. Even though we went away from lying per se, we've gone in a very valuable direction, rich new soil. And
Yeah,
I look forward to us continuing and
yeah,
seeing what else we can uncover in a subject that has not been delved into very deeply by the fourth way.
yeah,
Lying, even conscience and buffers, they're mentioned, but they're not gone into deeply. And I feel we're casting some fresh light here that's invaluable.
yeah. And I guess to like this as you listen to you, personality in itself is a lie, and it's based on lies, and it essence is much more aligned with inner mm, authentic nature, so to say, our authentic nature, whatever that is. Uh, and it's difficult because the people who raised us were in personality and they were inauthentic. So one element we got this transmission, how we become like them, and the whole society is like that. So that's
Mhm.
another important component.
And essence in
Also,
us
yeah,
is drawn to the truth, and personality in us is drawn to falsehood. They're like
yeah,
almost opposite sides of the magnet. And this is how they operate. And its personality is not bad. It's simply drawn to falsehood. And essence is
yeah.
drawn to truth.
So yeah, and I can see next time in the next talk we can this authenticity and being fake and not real and all of these patterns of hard to put boundaries, hard to say no, being a pleaser, all of them, they are false aspect of the self, yet they come from some type of woundedness. And this topic in itself correlates with essence, and from one angle, healing the essence. So, in bringing the adult consciousness, so to say, to some child pattern, to realize it's okay to tell the truth, it works much better. It is simpler. It is more loving for everybody, although it may be uncomfortable a little bit. So we'll touch on that, and we'll touch also on the intentional insincerity, because we don't need the false personality, but to operate in this world, we are not in a tribal culture. We do need what is called in the fourth way a true personality, of a work personality that is not naive, gullible, and totally open to being assaulted and taken advantage of. And we are going to talk about this too next time.
Also, it reminds me that in the end, being authentic, we're talking about truth and falsehood. Being authentic means the absence of inauthenticity. If you take away your falsehood, you're left with your truth. It's not a matter of trying to develop your truth, demonstrate your truth, demonstrate authenticity. It's the ceasing of being inauthentic, first within ourselves. And the same with happiness. Often happiness is not, I need to be more happy, I need to develop happiness. True happiness is kind of simply the absence of unhappiness.
Yeah.
And then anything can be joyful, fulfilling, pleasant. It can be what would be called happiness, but it's our unhappiness that is the issue. The absence of unhappiness yields the new, empty, raw world in which happiness can happen. And the absence of inauthenticity opens the door, paves the way for authenticity to happen naturally in us. Well, we're already starting on another topic. We better stop.
It's exciting.
Thank you.
And let's stop here, and we'll continue next time.
Thank you,
Thank
Mihai.
you, and stay tuned, everyone.